I grew up with an alcoholic parent, but not the movie kind, not the Hollywood kind, not the sitcom kind, not the quirky Arnie that gets a little bit too drunk at Christmas time type of alcoholic family member. My alcoholic parent was my mother. And it didn't start when I was a kid where I could just pretend it doesn't happen or not understand what's happening. It started when I was a teenager. The time in your life when you're figuring out who you are, or starting to figure out who you are, the hormones are raging, trying to figure out your place in the world and what that might look like. But all I got was chaos. I got cheap box wine, right? That kind of wine that they put into a silver bag and then they shove it in a cardboard box. You buy it cheap, and with that, we got the slow grinding decay of the person who raised me, my mother. The thing is that before the drinking started, she was already kind of off, right? Cold, narcissistic, unapologetic. I have no memory of her ever admitting that she was wrong ever about anything, right? She was one of those people that had this ironclad conviction that she was always right and you were always wrong, no matter what. And when you're a kid, you don't understand that that's dysfunctional. You just think that that's how it is. You just think that's how parents are, how people are. She was never physically violent as far as I can remember, but psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, she knew how to cut a person right where it hurt. She knew how to cut someone deep. She had a unique way of making you doubt yourself, emotionally and mentally, like I existed just to carry her burden and to feed her ego, to absorb all that damage she didn't want to see in herself and all that damage she put onto me and to my father. And then she got injured. She said instead of healing, she found alcohol. And when you're a teenager, when you go from a normal sort of upbringing when it comes to alcohol, like most people have a drink at special occasions on the weekends, that kind of thing. That's what's considered normal in our society, and it was the normal thing when I was growing up in the 90s in Australia. But when you're a teenager and your parents start really attacking the bottle, that hits pretty hard. Right, so one day you're growing up, your hormones are going stupid, and you're trying to figure out your place in the world. You're a teenager, and then the next minute you're suddenly trying to hold together a home that's coming apart at the seams, like that. And that cheap box wine, that cheap bullshit was the poison. But it wasn't a glass here and there, right? It wasn't one of those start at lunchtime and you switched off by dinner. Not like that at all. It was an immediate change. It was an obvious change, and it was a damn brutal change. And the thing is, right, alcohol doesn't just destroy the person consuming it, it destroys everything around them as well. So the mind went first, right? The emotional stability went first. Her ability to function as a mother, or even as a human being, right? And then the decay of the body set in. And then, if she ever had any sense of self-awareness or responsibility, that went out the door as well. By the end of high school, I was becoming an adult, and she was, well, something very, very different than what I remembered as a child. Something broken and volatile and drowning. Just, yeah. But here's the part people don't talk about, not enough anyway. When a parent becomes an alcoholic, it can rewire a child. It builds beliefs in you that should never have existed in the first place. It builds beliefs like, I am responsible for their emotions. If I just try harder, they'll get better. Love is supposed to hurt. Chaos is normal. If I don't jump in and try and fix this, everything's going to fall apart. And the thing is, nobody teaches you that those beliefs are poison. They just settle into your bones and they stay there and fester. I didn't realise just how deep those hooks were in until well into adulthood. And you know what's ironic? My ex-partner actually saw this first. She could see things about me and about this that I couldn't at the time. She would see the patterns, things like internalised guilt, emotional hypervigilance, people-pleasing behaviours. But the thing is, when you grow up with dysfunction feels a lot like home. And so I couldn't hear her, not fully. In fact, in some cases, not at all. It wasn't until years later, and I mean years, that the truth finally started to sink in. And by that time, we'd broken up, and I was with the woman who's now my wife and the mother of my children. She could see it too, but she didn't just point it out. She reflected it back to me, gently and honestly, without cruelty, without judgment. When you grow up with an alcoholic parent, especially a raging narcissist like I did, your sense of normal becomes twisted. The emotional ground underneath you becomes unstable. Or maybe it always was. And that internal compass, the one that should be pointing you towards healthier outcomes in all ways, starts to spin like mad. So the moral of the story is my mother's drinking didn't just damage her, ultimately cost her her life, it also damaged me. It built scars and it built survival instincts and survival mechanisms that don't just disappear when you leave the home. You carry them into adulthood, into your work, into your relationships, into your sense of self-worth. And one of the worst parts, when she died, we weren't on speaking terms. My mother died over 2 years ago. The reason we weren't speaking at the time was about money. Now that is a story for a different time and another video that I may or may not choose to make. We will see what happens. There was no deep, dark, philosophical divide. It wasn't politics, it wasn't religion, it was just simply money. Which just made it worse because it felt like the final act of betrayal and pettiness. And the truth is, there's a part of me, it's a bit dark and a bit irrational, I admit that, but a part of me still thinks she died just to piss me off. And look, I understand that's not logical, but when you grow up with someone who weaponizes guilt and manipulation, those thoughts, they just don't disappear just because the person's gone. The trauma doesn't die with the person who caused it, right? It lingers, it echoes, and it festers. And I have to live with that emotional damage for the rest of my life. The anger, the guilt, the confusion, the strange complexes that it's built in me, the sense of responsibility that shouldn't have been mine at all in the first place, that should never have existed, and that shouldn't have been mine to carry. These emotional reflexes that were built in a home where stability did not exist, not at all. The reason I tell this story is because it's not just about the pain, it's about understanding the pain and the consequences of youth. No, not the consequences of youth, the consequences of upbringing. What it is, for me, was about naming it and then deciding that it wasn't going to redefine the rest of my life. Because if you grow up like this, and if you are the victim of alcoholism in your life, you will understand this. If your parents or a parent drink themselves into oblivion and become a stranger, if they left scars that you're still trying to map and understand, you will understand these truths. The damage is real and the trauma is real. And healing, it's not a one-time special event. This is a process. It's a lifelong process. And honestly, it's not fair. It really isn't. It shouldn't happen to anybody, myself or anybody else included. But there is a way forward. There are tools and there are steps. There are things that you can do. There are communities and groups built by people who have lived through this exact same nightmare and worse, a lot worse. You see, I'm not making this video because I'm throwing some sort of pity party here. I'm making this video not just to tell the story, but to give context to why I have had certain things occur in my life, and it also informs why I do this channel. This is part of the reason this channel exists. And towards the end of her life, I realized a few simple truths. Helplessness is not loved. That kind of sacrifice is not love, right? Losing yourself trying to fix somebody else, that is certainly not love. Look, I didn't break her, and I couldn't fix her. And that's a truth that every child of an alcoholic eventually has to understand. But what you can fix, it's yourself. I learned eventually, painfully, stubbornly, that recovery doesn't just necessarily belong to the alcoholic themselves. It also belongs to the people around them as well. There are entire organisations dedicated to this. For example, AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. Everyone's heard of Alcoholics Anonymous, but did you know that there's actually 2 other groups attached to AA? The first one is Al-Anon. This is for the family members of the alcoholics, parents, spouses, children, etc. And Alateen, which is dedicated to the children of alcoholics. These organisations exist for a reason, because living with an alcoholic leaves wounds that stay long after the bottles run dry. There are other tools that help as well, things like therapy. I've engaged in therapy, especially trauma-related therapy. There's also journaling, which helps to untangle old beliefs from real truths. I've done a little bit of journaling. It does help. It's not something I do anymore, but it does help. It worked for me in the beginning of my healing. And here's an important one, learning boundaries. It sounds kind of silly to talk about boundaries in the context of being an adult, but we have to learn boundaries, what's healthy for us. Another helpful tool is simply to talk about it openly with people that you trust. I have a small selection of friends who I'd die for, who I'd kill for, who I consider my brothers and sisters. I'm lucky in that I have that to to lean on when I need it. And obviously I have my wife as well, so I'm very lucky in that regard. I have people I can talk to. But most important is to stop the cycle of silence. The cycle of silence that keeps the trauma alive, unhealed and unattended to. Because silence is the weapon that keeps us trapped. Breaking that story, telling that truth, even when it hurts. That is one of the most powerful steps towards healing. So the message of this video is simple. If you are carrying scars from a parent that was supposed to protect you but did the exact opposite in any way, I want to say something that I really wish someone had said to me. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't your job to fix them. You were simply surviving. And you are not a failure. And now you, the same as me, get to decide what comes next. This video, it's a little bit dark, it's a little bit raw, it's a little bit painful, it's a little bit difficult for me to make, and it might be difficult for you to hear, but there is also hope. Why? Because I'm here. So are you. And the trauma does not get the final say unless we give it the microphone and put it in the driver's seat. My mother's story ended with a bottle, and she died at 2:30 in the morning next to the front door of her house alone. But that is not the end of my story. And if you are watching this, it doesn't have to be the end of your story either. And look, healing is slow, it's messy, it's painful, it's horrible quite frankly, but it is possible. And if you need help, if you really need help with this, there are places you can go. We've already discussed Alcoholics Anonymous, we've discussed Al-Anon, and we've discussed Alateen. If you need help, go and get the help. It's there to take advantage of, and they're all really lovely people. I've personally engaged in Al-Anon, and I've made some really interesting and cool friends in the process. So, and if you guys are watching this, thank you. You have no idea how much this has helped. Use them and lean on them, because you don't have to do this alone. None of us do. I did not choose my mother's addiction. I didn't choose the trauma, the chaos, the years of psychological, mental, emotional and spiritual warfare that was waged on me. But I can choose what to do with the rest of my life. And so can you, my friends. So that is my story in its raw, unfiltered entirety. But it's not the end. It's the beginning of an understanding. And understanding is the first step towards reclaiming your life, towards reclaiming what's rightfully yours. If you made it here, thank you. And take care of yourself, because you deserve it.